The moon hung high, casting an eerie glow over the city, illuminating the silhouettes of buildings that stood like forgotten sentinels. Among them, the old Grayson Asylum loomed, a crumbling relic of a darker time. It had been shut down for decades, its walls whispering secrets of the tortured souls that once roamed its halls. I'd always been fascinated by urban exploration, and tonight, driven by a mix of curiosity and adrenaline, I decided to venture inside. I arrived at the asylum just after midnight, the chill in the air biting at my skin. The wrought iron gates creaked ominously as I pushed them open, the sound echoing into the night. My flashlight beam flickered as I stepped onto the cracked path leading to the entrance, the broken glass crunching underfoot. The building towered above me, its windows dark and hollow, as if it were watching me. I took a deep breath, steeling my nerves, and pushed through the rotting wooden door, which groaned in protest. Inside, the air was thick with dust and decay. My flashlight revealed peeling paint and graffiti that screamed stories of past trespassers. I could feel the weight of history pressing down on me, a tangible reminder of the madness that once filled this place. I took my first steps into the main corridor, where the flickering light danced over the remnants of the past, a rusted gurney, cracked mirrors, and shattered porcelain dolls whose empty eyes seemed to follow me. As I ventured deeper, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was not alone. Shadows flitted at the edges of my vision, but when I turned, there was nothing. I dismissed it as nerves, telling myself I was just imagining things. Still, every creak of the floorboards sent chills down my spine. I wandered into what appeared to be a common room, where the faded remnants of padded furniture lay scattered. The air was heavy with an oppressive silence that felt almost sentient. Suddenly, a distant sound broke the stillness, a soft, plaintive whisper that echoed through the halls. My heart raced as I turned towards the sound, my flashlight illuminating the darkened corners. "Hello," I called out, my voice shaking. The whisper faded, replaced by a low, guttural sound that sent a jolt of fear through me. I edged forward, my curiosity battling with my instincts to flee. I stumbled into the basement, the temperature dropping noticeably as I descended the narrow staircase. The air was damp and cold, wrapping around me like a shroud. The beam of my flashlight flickered, casting strange shadows on the walls. The low hum of machinery echoed in the distance, accompanied by the faintest hint of laughter, childlike, yet distorted, like a memory twisted by time. At the bottom of the stairs, I found a series of locked doors, their metal frames rusted and warped. One door was ajar, a soft glow emanating from within. Compelled by an unseen force, I stepped inside, my heart pounding in my chest. The room was filled with old medical equipment, rusted instruments scattered across a table. But what caught my attention was the wall, covered in old photographs. They were black and white images of patients, their eyes hollow and expressions vacant. In the corner, a child's drawing caught my eye, a crude depiction of a girl with wide, haunting eyes. I felt a chill run down my spine, a premonition creeping in as I turned to leave. But as I reached the door, it slammed shut, trapping me inside. Panic surged through me as I pushed against it, but it wouldn't budge. I was alone, with no way out. Suddenly, the lights flickered to life, bathing the room in an unsettling glow. I spun around, and in that moment I saw her, a small girl with wild hair and the same wide eyes as in the drawing, standing in the corner. She smiled, a chilling grin that sent terror coursing through my veins. "Play with me," she said, her voice echoing as if coming from everywhere at once. I backed away, my mind racing. "What do you want?" I stammered, my voice trembling. The girl's smile widened, and she pointed to the photographs on the wall, her gaze locking onto mine. "They play with me. You can't leave until you play." The laughter grew louder, swirling around me, and I felt the air thicken. I glanced at the door again, desperation clawing at me. "Please, let me go," I cried, but my pleas fell on deaf ears. The girl took a step closer, her form shifting, becoming more shadow than flesh. In that instant, I understood I was not just an intruder. I was a player in her game, caught in the grip of a darkness that had fed on the fears and anguish of those who had come before me. I reached for the door handle again, pulling with all my might, but it was as if something unseen held it shut. Play, the girl chanted, her laughter echoing in my ears, a cacophony that drowned out my thoughts. I felt a surge of energy pulse through the room, and the photographs began to shift, the faces of the patients contorting into expressions of despair, their mouths opened in silent screams, echoing my own terror. With a final, desperate effort, I threw myself against the door, and it flew open, spilling me into the hallway. I stumbled backward, gasping for breath, and turned to run, but the laughter followed me, the girl's voice trailing behind like a shadow. "You can't leave. You're one of us now." I sprinted up the stairs, my heart pounding, the darkness clawing at my heels. I reached the entrance, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the door, throwing it open and bursting into the night. I didn't stop running until I reached my car, the distant laughter still ringing in my ears. As I sped away from the asylum, the moon cast its pale light on the building, which seemed to watch me go. I glanced in the rearview mirror, and for a brief moment I saw her standing in the doorway, her wide eyes filled with that same chilling smile. I'd ventured into the depths of the asylum seeking a thrill, but I emerged haunted, carrying the weight of the echoes that still lingered in the night. The girl's laughter would forever resonate in my mind, a reminder that some places are best left undisturbed, where the past refuses to fade and darkness dances just beyond the reach of the light. It started with a rumor, the kind that slips through casual conversations and urban legends. I'd heard about the old hospital for years, how it had once been the city's grandest, only to fall into disrepair and abandonment after a series of financial disasters. It wasn't an asylum or some spooky place of torment, just a hospital left to rot after its funding dried up. The idea of it intrigued me. I don't know why, but something about a once vibrant building, now lost to time, drew me in. The day I finally went was overcast. The sky hung heavy with dark clouds, and the streets were empty, as though the entire city had taken shelter from the oppressive air. I'd done my research and found a weak spot in the chain-link fence that surrounded the hospital grounds. It was easy enough to slip through, and once inside, the building rose before me, its facade crumbling but still imposing. The hospital was enormous, larger than I'd imagined. Its brick walls were weathered and discolored, windows shattered or boarded up, with vines creeping up the sides like skeletal fingers. Despite the decay, I could still sense the life that once filled this place, patients coming and going, doctors and nurses bustling about, the hum of machinery and the quiet murmur of conversation. Now, it was silent. I approached the main entrance, pushing open the heavy, rusted door. It groaned in protest as it swung inward, and a wave of stale, musty air rushed out to greet me. Inside, the hospital was even more haunting. The lobby was vast, its tiled floor cracked and covered in debris. A large reception desk sat at the center, its surface thick with dust, the faded remnants of papers scattered across it. The air was cool, almost unnaturally so, and carried the faint scent of mold and decay. As I ventured deeper into the building, my footsteps echoed unnervingly in the empty halls. The silence was oppressive, only broken by the occasional distant creak of settling wood or the soft rustle of wind through broken windows. I explored the ground floor first, weaving through empty waiting rooms, once sterile hallways, and vacant offices. Medical equipment rusted and outdated lay abandoned, some of it overturned or smashed. Old charts hung from the walls, yellowed with age, their writing faded and illegible. Yet for all the disrepair, the layout of the hospital felt. I couldn't shake the feeling that the corridors were longer than they should have been. the rooms bigger, the angles slightly wrong. It wasn't overt, just subtle enough to make me feel uneasy, like the building itself had shifted in the years since it was abandoned. Eventually, I found a stairwell. The light barely reached beyond the first few steps, and the air was cooler here, almost damp. Something compelled me to go down. The basement, where the morgue, storage, and mechanical rooms were, had always been a source of fascination in abandoned hospitals. The thought of what might be hidden down there intrigued me. The steps creaked under my weight as I descended into the gloom. As I went lower, the temperature dropped further and the air grew thick with moisture. The flickering light from my phone barely pierced the darkness. Finally, I reached the basement level. It was darker here than anywhere else in the hospital. The narrow hallways were claustrophobic, the ceilings lower, the walls closer. It felt as though the building itself were closing in on me. The rooms I passed were mostly storage rows of metal shelves lined with forgotten supplies, IV stands, medical kits, and rusted surgical instruments. I found something I hadn't expected. A long corridor stretched ahead of me, much longer than the dimensions of the building should have allowed. The walls were different here, made of smooth, white tile, and the floor was a sterile, cold linoleum that seemed eerily well preserved. It felt as though I had stepped into a different place, entirely a part of the hospital that had been hidden away, forgotten. I ventured down the hallway, my footsteps now muted on the smooth floor. It was dead silent down here. Not even the distant groaning of the building's structure reached me anymore. As I walked, I passed door after door, all of them labeled with strange, faded signs in a language I didn't recognize. The rooms behind the doors were empty, sterile, and perfectly clean, too clean for a place abandoned for decades. There was something unnerving about how untouched this part of the hospital felt. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been here recently, though every rational part of me knew that was impossible. The hospital had been closed for decades, left to decay and crumble. At the end of the corridor, I found a set of double doors. They were the kind you'd find in an operating room, heavy, with a small, circular window set into each one. I pushed them open and stepped inside. The room beyond was vast, much larger than any operating room I'd ever seen. The walls were lined with strange machines, their purpose unclear, their screens dark. In the center of the room was a single operating table, its surface gleaming under the dim, flickering lights. I approached it slowly, my footsteps hesitant. There was something wrong here, something deeply unsettling. As I got closer, I noticed the restraints attached to the table, thick leather straps that had been worn and cracked with age. A faint, metallic smell lingered in the air, blood, though the table was clean. I ran my hand over the cold, steel surface, and a shiver ran down my spine. The room felt alive, like it was waiting for something, or someone. That's when I heard it. A faint sound, barely audible over the pounding of my heart. It wasn't a ghostly whisper or the clatter of something moving in the shadows. It was far more mundane, but infinitely more disturbing. The hum of electricity. I spun around, scanning the room for its source. One of the machines, a large, rectangular console against the far wall, flickered to life. Its screen glowed with a sickly green light, casting strange shadows across the room. Numbers and symbols scrolled across the screen, indecipherable and nonsensical. I backed away, my pulse quickening. This place, this hidden part of the hospital, wasn't abandoned. It never had been. I don't know how I got out. My memories of that part are a blur of panic and confusion. One moment I was in that sterile room, watching the machines come to life, and the next, I was back in the main hospital, running through the dilapidated halls toward the entrance. The building felt different now, more alive, as though it had been watching me all along, waiting for me to find its secrets. When I finally burst through the doors and out into the cool air of the courtyard, I turned back to look at the hospital. It stood there, silent and foreboding, just as it had before. Nothing had changed. But I knew better. There was something still alive in that hospital, something hiding in its forgotten depths. It wasn't ghosts or spirits, but something far worse, a lingering presence, a place untouched by time, waiting in the dark corridors for anyone foolish enough to wander too far. I had found it. Dead. And I had no intention of ever going back. I don't know why I decided to explore the old building. It had been sitting there for decades, looming on the edge of town like some forgotten relic of the past. Everyone knew about it, whispers of ghost stories, rumors of terrible things that happened there. But no one ever went inside. Not until that night, at least. It was almost midnight when I found myself standing in front of its rusted, creaking gates. The building towered before me, its windows shattered, revealing only darkness behind them. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that I didn't believe in ghosts. Besides, it was just a building crumbling bricks, decayed wood, nothing more. The air was colder here, colder than it should have been. I pushed the gate open, its rusty hinges screeching loudly, like it hadn't been moved in years. As I stepped inside, the overwhelming silence settled around me. No distant sounds of traffic, no insects chirping, just quiet. The main door to the building was half off its hinges, tilted at an odd angle, inviting me in. It took all my willpower to move closer. As I crossed the threshold, a shiver crept down my spine. The smell hit me first, a mixture of dampness, dust, and something rotten, though I couldn't quite place what. Everything was draped in layers of grime, untouched by time. A grand staircase spiraled up to the second floor, the wood cracked and faded. I flicked on my flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness in sharp, narrow slices. The light caught something scrawled on the wall and faded. Jagged letters, don't follow them. I stared at the words for a long moment, my pulse quickening. Them? Who were they? I pushed forward, trying to shake off the unease crawling under my skin. I had no real plan for the night, just a vague idea of exploring, seeing what was hidden in the forgotten corners of the place. The further I went, the more I regretted coming alone. It darted at the edge of my vision, too quick for me to make out any details, but unmistakably human-shaped. My heart skipped a beat, and I swung the flashlight in its direction, but there was nothing there, just more darkness. I tried to tell myself it was just my mind playing tricks, but my pulse wouldn't slow down. The air felt thick now, oppressive. Something wasn't right here. I could feel it, a deep, gnawing sense of being watched. I continued down the hall, every nerve in my body on edge, the flashlight shaking slightly in my grip. I turned a corner, and there it was again, that shadowy figure. This time, it lingered longer, standing at the far end of the hall, unmoving, just watching. It didn't look right. Its shape was wrong, almost human but distorted, like a reflection in broken glass. I froze, unable to look away. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, it vanished, melting into the darkness like it was never there. I felt a cold sweat break out across my skin. I should have left then. I should have turned around and run out of that place. But I didn't. I don't know why. Some part of me needed to know what was happening here. I had to understand. I took another step, the flashlight's beam jittering ahead of me. As I reached the end of the hall, the temperature dropped sharply. My breath came out in visible puffs now, and the rotten smell grew stronger. There was a door at the end, slightly ajar. I pushed it open, wincing at the loud groan of the hinges. The room was small and empty except for a single chair in the middle, facing a cracked mirror on the opposite wall. Something was wrong with the mirror. It didn't reflect the room like it should have. Instead, it showed the hallway. My hallway. But not empty. The shadowy figure was there, standing just behind me in the reflection. I whipped around, but the hallway was empty. My heart pounded in my ears as I turned back to the mirror. The figure was still there, closer now. Too close. I could almost feel its breath on the back of my neck. I stumbled backward, crashing into the doorframe, trying to steady my breathing. My mind raced. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. But it felt real. Too real. The figure stepped closer in the mirror, its features slowly coming into focus. Its face was twisted, hollow eyes staring back at me, mouth stretched into an unnatural grin. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I bolted, running down the hallway, my footsteps deafening in the silence. I didn't stop, didn't look back. The air felt heavy, like something was chasing me, getting closer with every second. I ran faster, nearly tripping over the broken tiles. The whispering grew louder, more frantic. I couldn't shake the feeling that the shadows themselves were moving, shifting around me. And then, just as I reached the front door, the whispering stopped. I didn't dare turn around. I pushed the door open, stumbling out into the cold night air, gasping for breath. The silence outside was a relief, but I could still feel it, that presence, watching from the darkness inside. I never went back to that building. But sometimes, in the dead of night, I still hear the whispering, faint but unmistakable, like it's calling me back.